Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Finance and Governance Committee. I'd like to advise everybody present that if you hear a long continuous siren, this is the fire alarm. Please don't pack up your belongings. You should leave the building through the nearest and safest exit by the back of the office through the police stairwell. If this route is blocked, you should exit the building through the main marble staircase. When exiting the building, proceed up the ramp and turn right. All attendees should congregate at the rear of the top car park where a register will be taken. Wait until you are told it is safe to re-enter the building. If you are a councillor, we have added you to the register. If you are a visitor and you have not signed the register, please do so now. Additionally, whilst the fire alarm is sounding, do not use the lift to exit the building. Now, please remind everyone to please put your mobile phones on silent mode and put the phone away for the duration of the meeting, thereby avoiding interference from your iPad or with the microphone. The meeting will be recorded and live streamed on YouTube, and therefore, when speaking, please remember to speak clearly. As the standing chair of the meeting, I have the discretion to terminate and suspend recording and live streaming if, in my opinion, continuing to do so would prejudice the proceeding of the meeting. Recording and live streaming of confidential items will not take place. To alert me as the chair of the meeting that you would like to speak, please raise your hand and wait for me to call upon you before speaking. Please remember, if you leave the meeting for any reason, you will not be able to take part in the vote on the item that is being discussed at that time. Members of the public will be able to view the live stream of the meeting via YouTube. Please can I request that when speaking, you make your points as succinct as possible to allow for the smooth running of the meeting. I can also take this opportunity to remind you to be polite and treat each other with respect at all times. Thank you. Right then, moving on to item agenda number 1. Do we have any apologies? Apologies from Councillor Tully.
Councillor Tully, and there's a substitute for Councillor Twos, which is Councillor Strauss.
Wilson, welcome, Councillor Strauss. Item number 2, declarations of interest. Okay, moving on to minutes of the previous meeting. To approve the minutes. We've all read them. I won't be voting on this item as I'm present. So if you're all happy, could I have a proposer? Seconder. Show of hands to confirm the vote. Lovely. Okay, so moving on swiftly to item number 4, private library funding request.
Marcus can introduce this one.
Fantastic, Marcus.
Oh, okay. Sorry, this paper is to reconsider the revision of the service level agreement with Prizewood Library, confirm the budget allocations as per the report. At last week's full council meeting, Darren Smart presented to the council the benefits of the town council funding the additional hours at Prizewood Library. As this item wasn't on the agenda at the time, despite discussion, council delegated authority to this committee to consider increasing the funding from £3,500 per annum, for which there's also 2 further years funding, to a figure of £10,000 per annum for additional opening hours for the library. Sufficient available funding in this year's budget to cover an extra £6,500 for this year and to add another £13,000 to the earmark. Recommended that this committee consider the revision of the service level agreement and the proposed budget.
Does anyone have any questions? I think we were all pretty much there at full council the other night.
It's not really a question. I'm just very pleased to see this come forward, and it's great that we've got a bit of spare capacity. We decided to do this because it's really important. We all know the case was made, wasn't it, at the last meeting? It was so impressive the work they do, and we just know that this extra money will have a wide-ranging impact. People who we really need to be serving also. I think it's a no-brainer.
Yes.
Yes, I totally agree with Caroline. I think it's a no-brainer, this one, because it's in such a deprived area, and it's a centre for all kinds of social and community activities, and I think it's really important, and I support it.
Thank you, Chair. You won't be surprised to hear that I echo the support of colleagues around the table. And I think we should absolutely be supporting this, and wanted to thank you, Councillor Pasquini, for suggesting this higher amount that we do put towards the library. I think it's a really good suggestion. I think it will do a lot of good in the area that I know we both live nearby. So delighted that we're doing this, and really pleased that we put in place a budget that's enabled us to be able to do these things.
Okay. Well, I won't say anything because I think everybody knows how I feel about this. So I'm delighted that it's here. So can I have a proposer for this, please? Seconder, yeah. A show of hands. Oh, actually, beg your pardon. Recommendations, that's the thing. Remiss of me. So recommendation is for members to consider the revision of the existing 3-year SLA with Somerset Council for private library to £10,000 per year for 3 years from the 7408/500 budget, covered in the 25-26 and 26-27 from the earmarked reserves. Private library and delegate clerk to consequentially amend the service level agreement with private library. Members to confirm the budget allocations detailed above and the movement of £13,500 for the earmarked reserve of Private Park to bring the balance to an EMR to £20,000. So we've had a proposal and a seconder, and can we see a show of hands in full support, please?
Thank you.
And that has passed. Okay. Agenda item number 5, operations and assets budget recommendation. So who would like to tell us?
Nobody here from operations and assets. So would you like us to run through it?
Yeah, please.
Well, I'm vice chair of operations assets, but obviously I'm preparing a report, because obviously I didn't realise that's road I wouldn't be here. So I'm more than happy if Clark takes this report.
The operations and assets budget, the primary changes are the fact that we're bringing the parks maintenance or the open spaces maintenance in-house. So the increases in the staff budget and the capital expenditure required to cover that are the key increases. Number of additional periphery items due to the cost of staff and the leases of the vehicles. Key changes that are in there.
Any questions? Wave a hand, sorry, no. Sorry, no, okay. Sorry, waving your hand. Okie dokie then. So I just, for myself, and just for the public that are potentially watching at home, just if you could remind them, so obviously we've taken on through devolution the services of the open spaces and things like we bought it in-house because
we will be doing from the 1st of April.
Yeah.
So the idea currently is to recruit staff to cover those roles so that we're ready to go on the 1st of April, and then to buy new machinery to do that, undertake those services. And that currently we're paying about £600,000 to Somerset Council to do that maintenance of the grounds, the pavilions, the play areas and the tennis courts. This budget reflects an increase of 12 additional staff, which costing £430,000. Additional machinery budgeted for as a minimum of £390,000. That's only £200,000 more than we're spending currently, Somerset Council.
Any questions? Yeah, Councillor Tewson.
Chair, I wasn't sure if you wanted questions on the smaller bits or the substantial bit at the end, but apologies. So some of these will be clear to my colleagues here, but I will ask them. So there's, I think there's 60,000 for vehicle leases, 25,000 for vehicle maintenance, and then above that you've got the van. So I haven't heard that we've taken on, or we're taking on lots of vehicle. Obviously there's the mayor one, but I presume that's in the civic one somewhere. I just wondered, it seemed like quite a big figure, that was all, but it wasn't there before.
Yeah, those are the additional vehicles that they'll need to move the equipment around.
So have we've made a decision to lease those already, or there may be come to members about whether we purchase or what we purchase again? I know we've been here before with the van and stuff. It's just,
There's a mixture of both at the moment. I think there's investigation going on as to what the best way forward is, so no decisions have been made finally.
I just wanted to ask so I can be clear, because my iPad is doing that stupid thing where the little circle goes round and round and it's frozen. I can't just kind of, this is, so because we're devolved services coming over to us, so we're hiring our own staff, we have obviously the cost of buying the vehicles and the kit. So at the moment next year, yes, it will be more expensive than what we're paying now, but I'm imagining two things. One is that there's an upfront cost because we have to invest in the vehicles to carry machinery around, otherwise it's not gonna fly. So there's a necessary upfront cost, but that's kind of front loaded, isn't it? Because you're not going to be replacing that every year. Long little maintenance. And I'm imagining that over the longer term it will get better value for money, certainly. And I don't know if it will be cheaper or work out the same, but certainly to my mind, I'm thinking we'll get better value for money because you've got a more responsive service, with it being local and us being in control of it, and not having to compete with sending somebody off to Minehead to shift sand off the seafront or go somewhere, you know what I mean? Because it's just focused on Taunton. There's fair assumptions.
Further questions?
You mentioned a figure around £300,000 for equipment. Is that correctly?
£390,000, I think, is in there.
How much of that would be a one-off spend for next year? Obviously, as Karen Keller said, it would be, I'm assuming it would be front loaded, but how much of that is a one-off purchase for things we all need as an act to set up our green spaces team, and how much of that would be ongoing?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that because I'm the operations and assets manager who put together the budget. I assume, I know I shouldn't assume, but I assume quite a considerable amount of it is a one-off cost initially, but of course we'll have to depreciate it over time and replace it.
Question? That's it.
I was just concerned about those £60,000 and the £70,000, £60,000 on play equipment and £70,000 on trees. I am very concerned about putting up the budget this year. That's what I will say from the outset. And I am concerned in how much money we are spending and how many poor people are living in Taunton. That balance, we need to get that right. And we need to think very, very hard about what we're spending money on. And I do see that it makes sense for us to take all this in-house, and we have to do it because Somerset Council were not going to do it. So it makes complete sense to me. But I think we need to look at everything very, very rigorously, because I'm not keen on splashing out more money now. I think we've got to have a very tight budget. Sorry, I just wanted to say that from the outset.
I was going to say I agree with you. Any further questions? If not, we'll move to vote. So recommendations, right. So to the recommendations for this item number 5 is to consider recommended operations and assets budget requirements for 2025-2026. Good.
Sorry, Joe. Just to clarify, sorry, we're just considering them at this stage. Okay, is that right? I know we're not voting. I know it comes to full council as well.
Yeah, so you're noting those budgets at the moment, and then once you get to the final budget at the end, the overall budget. So yeah, you're noting what the requirements is from each of the service areas.
Any other questions? May I have a proposal, please? Seconder. And a show of hands, please. To item number 6, community and place budget recommendations. Would you like to just give a brief outline? Yeah.
I can do that.
Okay.
Councillor Machini, as chair of community in place. We've also got Craig with us if there's any questions I can't answer. It was just a comprehensive review of the services within community and place have been conducted to inform the budget that you see before you today, 25-26. It takes into account such things as price increases in services, and it aligns the ambitions of our community and place plan. I'm recommending the 25-26 budget to finance and governance, which will meet the needs of our community. We're looking at things such as increasing the Christmas light budget, or looking at, and that's come as feedback from the community as to looking at different places to put Christmas lights. Also, the community and safety is also a big part of that budget. We are looking to increase the street marshal by an extra person, and also looking at working with local businesses to reduce antisocial behaviour in the town, get more of a cohesive approach with using the street marshal, using the CCTV cameras to increase the safety for our community and people visiting our shops. So those are just a few of the things on the budget. Any questions? If anybody's got any questions.
To the floor first. So I'll have one then, just noting the Christmas light expenditure, and I know we did a very good display this year, probably one of the best ones we've actually had, and I think that was already extended. But just following on from Councillor Gartside's point, we spend our money. How do we, from what has already been a fantastic display, and obviously feedback's been positive, with what we're proposing in terms of a preset potential rise, is that an area that we actually need to be spending money? And I'll give you a slight example that we've just had a moment ago, the Prizewood Library. £10,000 for that is actually going to go, it's going to have a knock-on effect. Okay, it's going to have a better outcome for a lot of people in different areas. Whereas Christmas lights, whilst they're wonderful and they give you good cheer at a certain period of the year, they're not potentially going to give you that same level outcome for the same level of expenditure. So I'm just curious about, with what we're proposing as potentially as a council, why we feel the need to expend more money on Christmas lights when we already had a fantastic offering this year, and better than probably than any other previous years.
Yeah, that's a good comment. Craig, could you answer that could you add to that for me?
Yeah, sure. So I guess over the last few years since I've been in this kind of position, we've primarily stayed focused on the existing offer, focusing on lights on East Street, High Street, 4th Street, North Street. there was significant investment from Somerset Council to paint the bridge, and I know that the bridge is an iconic feature in Taunton that also should be celebrated at the festive time, and to recognise the investment there. We also recognise that there are smaller independent businesses outside of the primary retail area that kind of get a little bit overlooked over the festive period. So the extension of the festive offer down through Station Road, Eastreach, just articulates the fact that our retail offer far extends the primary retail area of the town centre, and some investment within our iconic independent areas like Taunton Independent Quarter and Bath Place have also been screaming out for some attention and some investment from the town council to recognise the offer and the effort that they put into Taunton.
Any further questions?
I'd just like to add to that is that I have had in my going around and meeting people, people have been complaining that there's the area from the bridge to Station Road, that area is particularly neglected, and they wonder why that's treated like a war zone. And I have heard that comment made several times. It's not just once, it's several times. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, it's Station Road, one side of it's in my patch and one side of Bridge Street as well. I think that traders will welcome this. I think we've got so much more than just what's on in the main town centre, whether it's the Independent Quarter or Bath Place, all the traders all the way along Bridge Street and Station Road. And I think the thing is, what I think about this sort of thing as well, it creates a feeling that this is a really vibrant town, and that will create inward investment, that will increase job opportunities. So, you know, if we're wanting to invest in something that will benefit even our poorest communities and their life chances, investing in the town to make the whole town a much more attractive place to do business, people come in and shop, I think will benefit everybody.
Thank you, Chair. Just like to echo that, thinking about Eastreach, Watkins Toy Shop, for example, played on numerous occasions where there's an event like Ink Festival or other events where the road is effectively closed, where the traffic lights are, people turn around and go back towards the town centre, and they feel as though they're left out every time. So I personally do endorse the comments made that moving into Eastreach is actually a good idea.
How far down Station Road and Eastreach are you proposing to go?
So we would need to get some costings from the contractor in terms of what that offer is. So that those decisions would come back to the Community in Place Committee, but we would want to kind of stretch the budget as far as we can down Eastreach and Station Road. But it would be subject to the proposals that come back from the contractors and what those costs are.
Yeah, I appreciate some of those answers around Eastreach very much. I will just drill down in the figures a bit. So if I'm reading this right, it's quite good. So on the Christmas lights so far, we've spent just £35,500 year to date up to the 4th of December. And if I'm reading it right, the remainder of the original budget will be used, which will be roughly around 15,000 between the 4th of December up until the year end. And then we're asking for an extra 10,000 on that. So we're absolutely clear that we're spending all of the, £50,000 on the Christmas lights this year, are we?
So there are some additional costs that make up that Christmas lighting offer. So that would be, for example, the installation of the Christmas trees, all part of that Christmas lighting offer. So that includes the license fees to Somerset Council's highways. We have the costs for the pickup of the tree and delivery and the installation of the tree, and putting the fence around and just getting it kind of surveyed so it's structurally safe and secure.
So going on that, is that where the, that sort of 15,000 between 35 and the 50 comes from?
that's made up within that that budget line of 35,000.
So it could stand to say that we're under budget in terms of that budget line.
Yes.
Okay. So will it be necessary to increase it next year if we're already under budget?
So we know that when we extend the lighting across the area, that we'll also need to include infrastructure costs, infrastructure testing. So that would be part of the reason for the increase in that festive offer, for that additional infrastructure testing and costs. Okay.
I remember rightly when we had this discussion last year, a lot of the switches, the boxes need to be changed and updated, don't they? Because they haven't been done for many years. So.
Yeah. Yeah. The catenary crossings over the highway need to be tested annually, and the electric boxes need to be reviewed for kind of water ingress.
Sorry, yeah, on the youth bus provision, there's a lot of lines around the maintenance, the charging, and then down below, are we actually electric bus for youth provision? Are we thinking of purchasing a bus?
Someone mind just elaborating on what this is and what it will do?
Yeah, sure. So absolutely. So it was something that was added to the budget this year following a case study tour that was hosted by Yate Town Council. It was recommended by the National Association of Local Councils, who wanted to showcase the fantastic work that Yate Town Council do for youth provision within the area. Now they have several areas of youth provision that they focus in, but one of the elements that really resonated with me was the youth bus, primarily due to the flexibility that it offers, because it's not just a youth bus that's reaching kind of unserved areas within the local area, but it also had the ability and the agility to go to various places, whether that be in town centres or more rural locations, to engage with young people, particularly young people that perhaps didn't have access to the services that people would get in areas where there was some type of youth provision. So the idea behind the youth bus was to help us support young people in the Taunton area by providing information, advice, support, and to help address some of the antisocial behaviour issues we have in our town centre. We know from the reports from SWL Security that a lot of the repeat offenders we have are actually people under the age of 16. So having a youth bus that enables youth organisations to go out and meet these people and hopefully support them and direct them to a path of good, rather than issuing things like community penalty notices, which sometimes can just spiral young people into a world of antisocial behaviour and negativity. So this is an opportunity to engage with young people at the right time and getting them on the right path. I felt like putting the youth bus in place would be a really good first step in addressing ASB and also supporting young people in the area.
It does sound like a really fantastic initiative. I'm not aware of the work done in Yate. I'm just wondering if has any of this come from either young people themselves or existing youth services that we have in the town? Have you engaged with them, or has any of this need come from them? Because I'm aware of, through particularly the grants committee, how much amazing work is done by a whole range of different youth organisations who are fairly mobile and agile and providing things in a detached way. Not necessarily through a traditional youth club building. Yeah, has this initiative been discussed with them? How much support they'd be giving it? Who would be staffing it? Is this something that they see a need for?
So I can confirm that there's been no direct engagement with youth providers within the Taunton area on this youth bus initiative, but there has been conversations with Somerset Council, so with conversations with Jeff Brown, Community Services Manager, who's aware of this particular incentive. The contact that I have at South Gloucestershire Council also lives in Taunton and is aware of the organisations that we have in Taunton that would be happy to kind of support and engage with this type of initiative, but at this moment in time, there's not been any direct engagement with youth providers on this particular initiative.
Follow-up question. So can't see a budget line for the actual purchase of the, sorry, next page, sorry. So yes, the purchase of the bus, some costs of youth engagement and so on, which engagement is a separate line. Is the youth engagement line £50,000? Is that separate funding for youth services, or is that to fund professionals to staff the youth bus? And if not, how are we paying for organisations who will no doubt need funding to provide their staff services?
Thank you. Just looking at that budget, I can't see the 50,000 for youth provision engagement.
Yeah, should we?
I'm just going to add, I don't know if it's helpful, because there we do summer events at the North Taunton Community Centre as well, and they have what in the last few years they've had a very popular thing called the drug bus or the drugs bus. It's not what it sounds like. It's about raising. It's about and it's very popular with the youth. It's very popular with the young people, and they raise awareness of the dangers of drugs, etc., etc. I guess what I'm coming at is does something like this, the infrastructure or the bus or something exist that we can piggyback off the back of, rather than going all in on ourselves on something? Although I'm not against the idea, I'm just asking the question.
I'll take that now, or do you need to ask Caroline to ask hers and then take all of them at once?
I don't have an answer for Councillor Two, so I'll have to take that one away and have a think about that. So if you'd want to go to Councillor Ennis. Yeah.
Thanks. Just this might turn into a comment more than a question. In fact, just for clarity, I'd have asked that the 50 grand that was in the budget this year for youth provision that never made its way to the youth grant pot, I've asked that will be considered for carrying over to next year for further grants to external organisations, because I know there was a need for it, and I had to do a little gasket about this, whatever the last meeting it was, and people might remember that. And I might have been a slight gasket about youth bus, as in where the heck this come from. I do think there will be a need for us to do something proactive engagement wise, so I'm happy to leave it in. I think what we'll have to do is a proper engagement, you know, like when we've done engagements in the, you know, we've got getting used now to doing a spot of engagement with it. I think we need to do some engagement on that before we commit, you know, finally commit to anything. And then if we don't end up going ahead with that, which it sounds like it could have legs up there on it, because it will have wheels. But it sounds like something that I can sort of see how I can sort of see how that might work. But if then what might come back is actually, no, what we need is something else. Okay, at least we'll have budgeted for it. That's the thing. And youth engagement, I think it has to happen in myriad ways, doesn't it? There's lots of different ways to engage, and the ability to kind of like rove around, I guess, is quite important, to be able to kind of reach the parts that, you know, other things can't reach. So I'm happy to leave it in, even though it kind of did come some like out of the blue. But it is our intention that we want to up things on youth engagement, but we do need to have budgetary provision.
Yeah, I just want to just to echo Councillor Ellis's point. There is going to be engagement. There will be. It's not it's best to have it in the budget and with it and the budget line for youth engagement, because there will be engagement with youth organisations in the new year. Looking at ways that the town council can support, the ways that we can work with youth organisations
going forwards, because quite a lot in the other role as chair of the young persons working group for the LCN. You know, we hear lots of different organisations doing lots of different things for young people, and it's just about bringing it all together, and it's about having a coordinated approach for those young people in our communities, and it's about all of the community.
Mr. Strauss?
Thank you, Sharon. Could I just ask you, Craig, have we actually tried to put some numbers on how the bus is going to be stored? Does it go into our new unit? Will it fit? Bus is quite big. And the other thing is, do we need qualified bus drivers to actually drive it? Has that been taken into account? What's the actual estimate for that? Is it all included in your 50,000?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Strauss. So, yeah, the bus would be stored at the depot for security reasons. In terms of use for the use of the bus, so if we were to have youth providers coming in and saying we would like to utilise the bus to carry out some outreach work, then of course we would do the necessary checks for insurance, driving licences, and just ensuring that actually they have the right standard of licence to be able to carry out the work and to drive the bus. So it'd be part of those kind of checks, preliminary checks before the bus is hired out.
Do you want to come back?
Yeah, thanks. Just a couple of points. So in the conversations that I've had with Yate Town Council and South Gloucestershire Council, they've obviously highlighted actually in terms of youth work, it's really important that you go to where young people are, and actually the bus will enable us to do that. I mean, they do say don't expect young people to come to you, you have to go to them. So that was a really key thing that I took away from that conversation. The other thing that I've identified is that youth provision is actually a statutory service that is held by Somerset Council, and we know that Somerset Council have the means, as in they have the resource and the officers, but they don't necessarily have the financial capacity to be able to do this. So we can certainly put that investment forward and then strongly work with Somerset Council and their team to facilitate and to assist with the engagement with youth providers, and to work with the LCN as well, to kind of bring the key partners together and the youth providers together. Thank you.
Greg? Tom Deacon?
Thank you, Chair. Just a practical question. What size is the bus you're estimating for the pricing?
So based off the bus that is in Yate, we're looking at like an 8-seater, but it's kind of, the seats are removed, and inside you have some decks and a TV monitor and things that kind of attract
more like a minibus.
Yeah, minibus, yes. Minibus, yeah, kind of an 8-12-seater minibus.
I think that just my very personal view on this kind of this idea. I think it's a great idea. I sounds like I understand why it's not quite as advanced in the thinking as it needs to be before it comes to reality, but I have great sympathy with Councillor Edison's point around we want to up our youth engagement, and if we don't quite get to this next year, that is okay, because we'll find other ways to utilise the funding. So I think that's okay. What I don't want us to accidentally do as Town Council is reinvent things that are already happening in the town. I think that's just the one thing we need to be careful of, and I've always been a big advocate of us playing a facilitation role to help those organisations who are already doing brilliant things to just keep doing more of them. So I think as long as that's kind of at the heart of it, I can see it sitting in there, and there's some flexibility around how the budget might actually be used within the year. But I think there's probably just a little bit more groundwork to do before it gets up and running, which I think we're all accepting.
Yeah, from my point of view, I'm always uneasy when the council creates lines for budget but doesn't really have the detail wrapped around it, especially when it's going to cause an effect on council tax precept going up and things. My only concern is it's going to be £65,000 for effectively a minibus. That is reliant on outside organisations using it, and it may be sat in the depot for 6-7 months a year. I don't personally, whilst the idea sounds appealing, I don't know if maybe it might be best served elsewhere, or not including that line in the budget at all, because without the detail, I just don't think we, it's responsible as a council. Oh, you can plan, but you need to have that ready to go, because I don't think it's acceptable to even then say, well, if we don't spend the money, we can then use it elsewhere. We just need to produce a budget that we actually require a budget, not, you know, on the hope we might want to use this at some point. Oh, and if we don't use it here, we'll use it somewhere else. I don't think that's acceptable in my personal opinion. So yeah, and I have big reservations that it's just going to be sat in the depot for it. Craig, I saw you had your hand up. Did you want to come back?
Yeah, it was just on your point about, you know, having the unit kind of sat there and not used. So we are aware that like the Somerset Association of Local Councils have funding available, and I certainly know that we could potentially look at securing some funding for a part-time youth worker or something like that could help to kind of get the van out in the community and engage with other youth providers, and just helping to promote the fact that it's there and it's available to be used, and so it's not kind of sat unused.
Heatherton Parish Council may have got one of these like minibuses that's mainly for youth, but it's definitely used by, and that's quite small, South Heatherton. I'm pretty sure it is kind of shared, almost like shared, because I'm sure Rama Life use it. So there's probably some quite low, maybe more local examples of councils that have done that sort of investment and what happened. The thing is, I can see that if you budget whatever it is, 64 grand for the vehicle, and then we end up deciding that's not a bad idea. I know for a fact, I'm just remembering in my head, there's a new youth provision that somebody wants to start where they'll need support match funding for capital to open a new. So if we don't spend it on the bus, there will be something else lurking around the corner. But I think that's just off the top of my head, one thing I can think of. And I know there's places where, like the Scout Hut by St Andrew's Hall, where they've had a small grant to kind of do stuff up. And then my brain is ticking over, thinking about discussions with Somerset Council. This is a couple of years ago, when they were thinking about capital grants they were applying for from DCMS, and there was one venue, and I can't for the life of me remember what it was, but it was in North Taunton somewhere. That didn't end up going forward. That was a youth provision thing that needed capital investment, and it didn't end up going forward. And I was like, at the back of my mind thinking, okay, we need to log that for future reference because it sounded important. What I'm saying is essentially is that it's better to have that provision because is it 10 funds over?
What's that? North Taunton Youth Club for the redevelopment of that pitch. That's in desperate need.
Yeah.
That's dangerous. Councillor Strass.
Thank you, Chair. When the bus was originally mentioned, I visualised a much bigger vehicle. We're now talking about a minibus, which is actually quite interesting because if the seats could be removable, but then back again, I can think of many instances during the year where that could be used as a minibus rather than a display vehicle. It could have a lot of flexibility, and I can see other uses for the town council to use such a vehicle.
You want to say something?
Packer Hughes, that's
Wow. The other thing, somebody mentioned other things that people are doing. I only mention it because it's in Victoria Park recently, is a charitable religious organisation. I think it's Youth for Christ. They've got a minibus and they go to parks now and have like an awning and go to places. So it's just to add that there are other people in that sort of space, if you like.
Yeah, just as follow up the comments that I made earlier, I was previously a trustee of a youth group that provided detachment work in the frontier area, and they were incredibly successful. And yeah, the point about taking youth work to where the young people already are works much better than say having a youth club in a building where the young people aren't. So having a mobile system is fantastic. It doesn't necessarily need an expensive vehicle. They did it with a tent. And some thermos, hot chocolate. My concern with this is that it sounds like a fantastic idea. It sounds like quite an expensive idea. And through my experience with the grants committee, the main expense is staff time. And we can provide this bus, but the existing youth groups won't necessarily have the capacity to provide an additional service beyond what they're already doing. And we will probably need the same amount of money again to fund the groups that we would be looking to do that. So it concerns me the project is being put together at the moment without reaching out to those groups and saying, what do you want? Is this something that you can utilise? What would you need? How much would it cost for you to run, 3 hours after school on a Monday afternoon? Because you need to have multiple youth workers because child protection is you need to have at least 2 staff after loan workers. There's quite a lot to unpick in terms of how much the additional cost would be beyond providing the vehicle. And I think there's a lot of work to do to work with all the existing organisations to make this what could be a fantastic project. It's whether we put it in the budget this year, whether we put a pin in it and do the legwork first next year's budget.
Any thoughts on Amber's suggestion?
So yeah, I would agree with Amber's suggestion. I think, while it does seem that we're allocating a big sum of money without enough information, and I also think that Tom is right. We need to piggyback on other people's organisations that are already in existence. We're actually going to vote on setting aside 114,500 because it's not just the bus, it's also the 50,000 for youth engagement. And it's a lot of money. And as Amber was saying, then, it'll be coming to the grants committee as well, so it's a very expensive project.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to find a way forward is seems like a very good idea potentially, but what we're looking to identify is some money to develop that idea over the coming financial year without committing so many lines in the budget to something we're not sure. But I do agree with what the chair and Councillor Garside said about people looking at the increase is going up this year. So if we can do anything to potentially reduce that without making sure what we're going to spend our money on next year is well thought out at this stage.
Yeah, just within this, just as a reminder, well, certainly to my Lyndon colleagues, we said we spend 100 grand a year on youth provision. So I'm very keen that we do put some more money aside for the grant. We can do because we haven't spent the youth provision pot. Yeah, because there are organisations that I know will be in need. I'm just saying that again because I just feel quite passionate about it. As long as we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Councillor Garside, did you have your hand up a moment ago? No, fine. That's speaking.
So just on that, and I'm ready to the clerk or Deputy IFO's help on this. So my understanding is that we've got an underspend in year of £50,000 against youth. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And there's a £50,000 youth engagement line in the budget here. So we could, in theory, have £100,000 against youth engagement next year, which would hit the ambition, which we rightly set around having £100,000 for youth, and we could therefore remove the bus line if we wanted to for next year. So take out the 64.5 and possibly the other additional 4.5 that's in there, so £69,000. We could remove that and still leave ourselves with £100,000 to spend on youth provision next year. Whilst I think the councillor who said it, I apologise, we develop the idea further so that the year after we've got a concrete plan that we're ready to go and roll out as we get the budget approved. So I think there might be a way forward. I'm not on the committee, so I can't suggest that formally, but from the sidelines, so to speak, I don't know if that's an agreeable way forward.
Anyone else? So obviously we're just noting if there was any amendments, where would that have to take place?
When you get to the full budget.
Right. So in that case, then I think it's been well discussed. I agree with the leader with his observations on it. So if we're happy to to vote on this, the recommendation is to consider the recommended community and place budget requirements for 2025-2026. Obviously, we're not voting to approve it. Whatever, that will go to full council with any amendments. So can I have a proposer, please? Second, and a show of hands.
Left the room, Kathleen.
Thank you. On to number 7, grants budget recommendation. Who would like?
Councillor Packer.
Is this one, it's fairly straightforward. Most of our budget lines are the same as last year. We're actually £25,000 less because we advocated putting that amount of money over to the community in place budget so they can be more proactive with the annual events that happen every year rather than forcing them to come through the grants process annually. Otherwise, it's fairly straightforward, and then maybe some renegotiation, it sounds like, in terms of increasing the youth grant provision.
Questions? Oh, nice and simple. All right then. So that we are to consider the recommended grants budget requirements for 2025-2026. May I have a proposer, please? Trellis and a seconder. Outside and show of hands. Thank you. Number 8, personnel budgets. Who would like to take this one? Amber again? Crack on.
I wasn't prepped for introducing this one, so apologies. Obviously, there is an increase, but that is enormously to do with the increase in staff in the green space, open spaces team. So yes, the number of people that we will be employing next year will be a lot more than it is this year. I think the clerk is probably best placed to answer slightly more detailed questions on this.
Questions?
Just to obviously reiterate what Councillor Packer Hughes has said, the new staffing structure went to the personnel committee and it was scrutinised, and each position was obviously discussed in detail, and they was happy to note that that was the proposed structure for this year. The council agreed on last Tuesday at full council to obviously make some environments, which has allowed us to recruit in advance of some of the positions for the 1st of April, which is obviously the positions that have just been advertised on Friday and on Monday.
We'll have some observations on the future staffing structure. So obviously I appreciate the taking on of the open spaces staff. That obviously needs to happen, so I can understand that. But there are just, can't see the full chart because some of it's not obviously loading properly, or it's not structured properly, because their names are blanked out some of the positions. But I do question the amount of staffing that we have for this size of organisation, and it looks like there are jobs that quite literally overlap. Don't understand in terms of, there we go. So here we are.
You want to look at this one?
Is that okay? Yes, thank you. Might have to zoom in on the blinds about. Here we are. So we've got, where is it? Yeah. So we've got a maintenance, we've got an operations and assets manager, followed then underneath them is a maintenance lead. Then underneath them, we have a facilities coordinator and then 3 facilities assistants. I'm a little bit lost on the logic of how many members of staff we need for the facilities that we have, or what they'll actually be doing. We then have deputy town clerk, deputy RFO, senior finance lead, fine. Then we have a finance officer of 30 hours a week, but then a payroll officer at 25 hours a week. Some of these roles seem like they can overlap. Obviously, then we've got a finance apprentice, which obviously they're learning their trade, so that's absolutely fine. We've got a finance resilience lead, then a grants officer underneath them, and a business support assistant. Again, I don't understand why some of these roles are not combined. This seems like we're making separate roles for separate people, when you would find in normal business world that a lot of those roles are combined anyway. Where's the other ones that responded? We have, again, we say we've got the town clerk, the deputy clerk, the community and place manager. We then have a community lead, and then a culture officer, and then a separate climate and place officer. Again, some of these roles seem like they can be combined. I just don't understand the level of. We're going to have how many members of staff are we going to have for a town council level? I mean, I know our budget is effectively going to be akin to half of what Mendip District Council was, but surely some of these roles seems like they overlap quite considerably.
There's a few comments I can add to that. It's worth bearing in mind that quite a lot of these roles are part-time, so the full-time equivalent is not as high as it actually looks. There's also a need for resilience within the organisation to allow for people being ill, people leaving, people being flexible. So there is a need for that as well. But also, because of the size of the council now, we are going to go into the level where we'll be audited, which actually then increases the workload and the number of staff needed for that documentation. I think Gail can probably explain that slightly better, but it's going to increase our staff burden, unfortunately, because we've tipped into the next tier of finance.
But I'll let you come back, and then I'll get the questions from you.
Certainly the paper that went to the Finance and Governance Committee, was it last month? I can't remember now. That shows once we go over the 6.5 million, then we become a category 1, tier 1 for audit purposes, which means that we then have to follow the full statement of recommended practices and IFRS requirements, which is a huge difference to the current annual governance and accountability return. So we will need a lot of staff. We will need more staff than we've currently got in the finance function alone to meet our requirements there and ensure that we can deal with the audits.
Anders?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come in and support the 2 extra appointments on the community and services. We've only got 1 Craig at the moment, and the amount of work that's coming through community and place is growing ever larger, and we do need extra staff to help facilitate all of that.
Yeah, Councillor Deacon.
Thank you very much, Chair. A question, because like you, actually, when I saw some of the numbers, I did take a bit of a sharp intake of breath. Donna, can I ask you, so as a percentage, we'll be at about 40% of our income going into staffing. How does that compare to other kind of parishes, towns similar to us?
So this was something that came, sorry, can I ask something?
Yeah.
This was something that came up in the personnel committee, and there was an exercise completed recently, and there was 20 other councils who had responded to their expenditure based on their precept or their expenditure, and being at 39% still put us right near the bottom, around about 17 on the list. So you've got other councils, you've got Swanage, who was up by 147 because their increase in their expenditure. You've got Weymouth, which their staffing costs are 60.9%. So we favour really, considerably.
How do the staff numbers compare?
There aren't no staff numbers, but the costs, that's their staffing cost for the year. And these figures were based on their 2023-24 allowance. These figures that we've inputted are 25-26. So therefore, these figures on here doesn't equate to the percentage of the national insurance increase and all of those added in as well. So that would make us even better in that respect. At just being 39% of our budget, we are still relatively low compared to other councils with precepts and expenditure of our size.
The councillor Tears, and I'll just think I'm going to phrase my question.
Yeah, I agree with what Councillor Deacon said. It's a big number, but we have this structure now. What I would ask, or would ask for to happen, or ask if it does happen, as we go forward and say perhaps people choose to leave and move on to different areas or different jobs, is there a full appraisal of that role when someone leaves? So is there an honest appraisal to say, actually, this person's now leaving, but looking at the workload they had, etc., you may not have to replace them at that full hour? And also, and just quickly, I don't want to take anybody's pay award away, honestly, but it was just a question: is that set by us on performance, or is that set by government levels of pay?
I respond to that one. So yeah, it's contractual, so it's set by government recommendations. So obviously we have to follow those. And yes, we do carry out reviews, and we do that, you know, periodically when we look at the structure every year as to, you know, can it move better? Can we move people over? What are the capacity within some of the roles? And the capacity obviously that we've got at the moment is, you know, showing the increase that we need the extra resilience, because we haven't got people that can cover when people are off on holiday. As Councillor Fernandez has said, you know, there is only one Craig, there is only one, you know, project officer, or there is only one senior finance person. At the moment, there's more work than there is capacity of staff. So that's why we've obviously had to increase it going forward. But yeah, the majority of it is, you know, the operations and assets, because we're bringing those services back in-house.
So would you say, I don't know if you have these figures, but I would say Weymouth is roughly the same size as Taunton?
It's actually small. It's actually smaller, and yet they've got more staff.
So they
have 60, based on their current year figures this year, what was it, 60.9%, and they are a smaller council. Their preset is 3.23 million, and yet they spend 60.9% on staff.
That's not so okay. Just trying to figure out how I would word this. So, in terms of like-for-like responsibilities, are they very similar to what we're going into, or what do you know? That's what I'm saying, because they may be overstaffed for their size, so that doesn't necessarily mean they're efficient in doing what they're doing.
I can't comment on what other councils have as their staff, whether they're oversized.
I don't think that's a barometer in terms of we should judge ourselves against how other councils set themselves up on, because they could be overspending for what they actually require, when actually they could be top heavy, and actually they could have more money that's going into services. That what I'm trying to say is, for us, I mean, we've got an example of the youth bus, for instance. You know, we come up with a decision, we'll put this line in and then come up with the detail later. Well, I'm talking, you know, forgive me, and I'm not bad mouthing you, but I'm looking at the role just in front of me here, grants officer. It's a full-time role. How many grants are we dishing out? And you know, that would make that a full-time. Do you see what I mean? I'm just trying to think, is there overlap in a lot of these roles, which some of the job descriptions that I've seen, I would say there is overlap within some of those roles, that we don't actually need a separate person for that specific thing, a separate person for that specific thing. You would expect it to be wrapped up into a package if you're certain roles. Yeah.
Well, yeah, at the personnel committee, yeah, we've gone over lots of reports where there is reviews of, you know, the work that our employees are doing, and, you know, work that Donna does and her staff to review what, you know, the staff in each department are doing, how efficient they are, and whether they're meeting the standards we expect And in terms of, the officers, as I say, a grant officer, we're going to be looking to, see what money we can put out and what money we can bring in. And if we had one person, having one person doing that is pretty great. But having maybe more people to look at the stuff we can bring in, and then other people to look at what we can give out, would just make us, I believe, more efficient. So I think just, it can seem like having jobs just for the sake of it looks a bit weird, but when they are actually proving that when they are proving that the outcome actually generates on the word for it.
Benefits.
Yeah, generates an actual benefit for what the council are trying to do. I think it's worth employing people.
Any other questions, Christine?
The phone slightly beat you to it, but I was out and I forgot to raise that for the example of the grants officer, which you raised in your initial comments. Previously, the grants officer focused purely on external grant, giving other outgoing grants, which is actually quite time consuming. The number of applications that we have, the amount of background checks that need to be done, particularly things like the venue grants, where we're looking at quite complex financial details for people asking for quite large sums of money. The due diligence that's involved to make sure that that money is being well spent is actually quite large. But the new grants officer is going to have a huge focus on incoming grants and actually doing a lot of work on bringing additional income into the council, for instance, for things like the toilet renovation projects, that sort of thing. So it's being able to expand that role is actually an income generating side of the personnel team that is not necessarily highlighted by that the organisational structure.
Thanks for the clarity on that role. Another example which could do explaining is internal comms. I mean, we have, this doesn't show up in my thing, but we've got multiple people doing multiple communication roles by the looks of it. So I don't understand why we need someone specifically for internal comms. Again, in the outside world, that just you can have, at this level of organisation, you would have two people doing two different types of communication roles. You seem to have multiple, so I'm just wondering, again, just overlap. But it'd be interesting to see job descriptions going forward in the future.
Was there a particular question you wanted me to respond?
It was just
comment.
It was just a comment of as I said, my observation. It seems a little top heavy in certain aspects, and it just needs a little bit more clarity and detail again for the public as well, because they'll want to know what their precept is being spent on. Ed?
I think based on the information you want to find, it's probably worth coming to the personnel committee and making maybe a request, an agenda request to look at these things, and then if you want more information, we can go through it.
Assume that would have already been asked at the personnel committee by the committee itself.
Probably.
These type of questions. Okay, fine. Any other questions? No. Okay, so members to note the personnel budget requirements for 2025-2026. May I have a proposer, please? Ed, second, and a confirmation of the vote, please, with a show of hands. Thank you. Budget settings number 9, proposals for 25-26. Members to consider the draft budget requirements for 25-26 and confirm the recommendations to full council for consideration. Members to consider the precept request for 25-26 and recommend it be taken into full council. Any questions, or would an officer like to lead on this?
Would you like to run through the report, Gail?
So the budget that's been put together as it currently stands, showing a 12% increase in precept, which has resulted in a 9.91% increase in the BAM D charge, because the tax base for the year has also gone up by 2.33%. the changes in the report, in the budget report, in some reorganisation, so we've restructured the budget so that service lines have their own staff costs in them now, and capital expenditure has been pulled out. But the main changes are the devolution of services. This year we've budgeted for the public convenience cleaning costs, which we took back in house at the beginning of September, so those charges have reduced. And there was the transfer of the open spaces maintenance on the first of April, which has been budgeted for, which we spoke about previously, resulting in staff costs of 430,000 and additional machinery budgeted at 395,000. An additional item that's been added was discussed at council last week is the freehold purchase of Trafalgar House at Darlington Trading Estate, where we'll currently operate the depot. The year one costs 235,000, which includes cost of stamp duty, legal fees, and an investment agent. Those costs will reduce to 100,000, less of course any saving that we make by not having to pay the depot rent in future years. Then the £60,000 that was put into play parks was to support the play park refresh following the report that was presented to council of the changes that could be made to the play parks, which will cost up to £1 million. And we are using the grants officer there to look at funding to see what funding we can get and support that. But we only currently have 172 earmarked for that. 90 that's not being spent in this year's budget, which would also go to add to that. With the 100, I think it was in the budget, that would give us about half of what we need. Legal costs, consultancy and other fees have been increased. Two reasons: transfers that have come across of legal fees, obviously if we're buying Darlington Trading Estate, and as we move into the SORP accounting, we're going to have to get all of our assets revalued next year, so that in the following year, we have up-to-date asset valuations to compare for SORP accounting. Staff costs have been just the main changes, apart from the structural changes, are the increase in the national insurance to 15%. The apprentice pay is going up from £6.40 an hour to £8.55 an hour from the 1st of April, and that's also included a 3% national pay award, of course, which we have no control over, but looks about where unions are requesting ones at the moment. The staff costs include an increase in the full-time equivalent to 61.8 and are currently sitting at 39%. 9.9% of the preset requirement for next year. The total staff costs are offset by the fact that in the budget this year there's no costs added for devolved 2P costs. They've actually been carried within the existing budget this year, and were part of the reason that we've been able to reallocate that to earlier at the beginning of the year. The youth bus is in there as well. It's been discussed and debated at 119,000. And then other notable changes are the addition of a additional street marshal, more toilet refurbishments, the acquisition and refurbishment of building 2, including the changing place toilets, extra Christmas lights, and a capital projects and amount for projects to be determined in the year 25-26. Those are the key changes. In the report, there was also a chart showing the expenditure by service line, and also the fact that even with a loan to borrow to pay for Darlington Trading Estate, our expenditure far exceeds our income. Our income is very low at the moment, and we need to generate income earning assets going forward. So overall, as the tax base has gone up and the precept request in the existing budget is 6.4 million, needing a band D precept of £328.97, which is a 29.67 increase over the year, which is 57 pence. Those are the key changes to the budget. One other thing is if we only reduced what we've got for a precept increase of only 5%, I've put papers on the table for this. It shows the impact over 10 years of taking back our precept from the 6.6 million to 6.3 million, which would cost the council over 10 years 16.3 million in lost income.
Any questions?
Yeah. You mind just explaining, that's a big figure, and I'm looking at, I don't really, yeah, can you just explain to me, please?
Yeah, so if you look at what I've put on the desk, if you lose it in year one, and in year two, you've lost it already, but you also lose it again. That's the way it works because you've not had it in 1 year. So you've not got it in the next year either. And that's a cumulative effect as you go through.
Are you talking about no rise?
No, I'm talking about if we were to take the 9.91% rise down to only a 5% rise, which would be £14.95 a year or £29 a week, then that's how much we would lose from that over 10 years. And we also don't have considerable reserves to enable us to make that money up as we went through.
Any questions?
Yeah, thank you. I know I've not seen this before on the proposed building at Trafalgar House. It said that ultimately one day all the council staff could work there instead of having this space. Is that what that means?
Yeah.
And does that actually stack up with places to park? You know, because working at Galmington Trading Estate is quite different to working here. So it's an interesting one that I hadn't heard before. So if that's great, if that's a genuine thing that could happen, it means a longer walk for me, but you know, there you go. And also a couple of other smaller points that I didn't bring up on the thing. So I note that there were last year there was no budget for SIL receipts, but we actually got some SIL receipts. So is there, I'm totally naive, is there potential that they come in on top of the budget as well? Okay, great. And then just because it's my area of interest, we didn't budget this year and we don't budget last year for any election costs. So does that mean if there's like 6 by-elections, there's no cost to the council? I realise there's no substantive thing to the election costs, but surely if we have 6 councillors resign, we need to put some money aside to cope with that.
We did budget this year 42,500, but that was the budget that was owing.
None this year.
To Somerset. We do have an earmark reserve, and every year we will put money remaining from that budget to that earmark reserve to cover election costs.
Any other further questions?
I think this might be a question for Tom. So it's very different with the makeup of the council at the moment, but the budget's been in front of all the committees, so pretty much all the councillors, and then we go to full council with this. So it might not be a question for this forum, but are we allowed to challenge officers on this now? This is not a closed book, so I'm not suggesting we will, but the amendments could come forward at full council. Changes can be made on that night for agreement by any councillor can contact yourself, Tom, or the officers, etc., etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So this year we wanted to really make sure. So I take one step back because I think one real success of this year is how positively our committees have worked. I hope people share that committees have got far more engaged in the detail of things and been able to keep things moving forward through the system, I think far more effectively than in our first year of operation. And in that spirit, the view was, well, each committee really rightly should be the first to review the budget elements that relate to the services they've been discussing all year. So that was the starting point, which is why it's gone through each committee first, before first of all coming together in one place tonight.
Yes.
So that's when you see everything together. So that's why we've also gone through section by section, because that's a recommendation from each committee. In terms of the next step, yes, it would go from here if the committee agrees as a recommendation to full council that this is the budget you're happy with. Of course, that can be amended when it's in front of full council, because there are other councillors who aren't here this evening who might want to change things. My understanding of the wording of the recommendation tonight, though, is that this committee could make a recommendation or an amendment if they want to. So if, where we were talking about the youth bus and we might want to move some things around, say you as a committee might want to move some things around, you could agree that this evening as an amendment to take that to full council. I suspect you could also ask officers to put forward a couple of options to full council. So you could have one with that in and one without, as an example. That's also a potential route forward. I'd warn against having too many options, but if there's one or two would rather put to full council, that's absolutely possible. If that helps. Yeah.
Any more? No. So, members to consider the draft budget requirements for 25-26 and confirm recommendations to full council for consideration. Members to consider the preset request for 25-26 and recommend them to be taken to full council. May I have a proposal? Seconder. Yes, and a show of hands.
Can I just confirm that you are recommending the current budget as it stands at that 9.91%? Yeah.
Yeah, so working with the committees is new one on me. Normally we would go to full council and there'd be amendments and everything. So it seems odd that a small committee could change the proposed budget, but I would like to, Chair, we talked about the bus at all, quite a lot tonight, and we didn't come up with a proposal. So I don't know if you need an amendment or if it's the will of the committee, but if we need to test some theory, I would like to act on some of the discussions around reducing some of the set spend around the bus, but also making sure there was some money to explore that further. I think that was your point. But if that is easily done, I don't know. But it might not be the will of the committee, so that needs to come forward for a vote, I guess. I don't know.
Councillor Fernandez and then I'll see the clerks.
The way I just heard it is that when, I mean, this, correct if I'm wrong, Donna, if regarding the youth bus, I mean, I could, as a committee, the Community Affairs Committee could ask Craig, the officer, to draft a separate report with an option, either option 1 that the youth bus stays in, or option 2 that we take the youth bus out and we increase the funding for the either, because there's also talk about increasing the grant funding committee to an extra £50,000 there. So I think what I would see is that we would take as to a report to the full council with options on it, say option 1 or option 2. Be grateful for clarification.
Yeah, so what you can do tonight is you can approve to recommend 2 budgets, one with the youth bus in and one with the youth bus out, and then you can let the full council make that decision. We can produce 2 papers, one with and one without.
Any other further questions? Yes.
So are we now voting on whether we agree to increase the precept by 9%?
It's a recommendation.
It's a recommendation.
That's just a recommendation. Okay.
We wanted to respond.
Oh, just put the figures into the spreadsheet, or taking the ones out in connection with the youth bus, and then put it into the precept spreadsheet, and that reduces the increase in the precept to 8.77% to £325.55 per year. Sorry. So the band D would go up then 50p instead of 57p.
Yes, so it's 7 pence to take out now. 7 pence a week to take out the youth bus initiative.
Can I just say that many people have actually come up to me and have begged us not to increase the precept. We have 1 in 6 children living in poverty. We have some of the lowest wages in the southwest. I think, you know, we're blithely spending all this money. I think we really need to think very carefully about this, and I'm really very concerned about how it will be seen by everybody. Oh, well, they're putting the precept up again. You know, it went to maximum last year. It was not very popular at all. It's not very popular out there. Lots of people have complained. Well, you know this, you probably all know this, have complained. You know, but yes, okay, we need a town council, maybe it's better. You know, the fans of the town council say, well, it's better, but they're not the ones who are agitating, they're the ones who are really on the poverty line. I just need to sit, I just need everyone to think very carefully before doing this.
I'll make 2 points in response, well, 3 actually, just very quickly in response to that. Firstly, we've seen the mistake other councils have made by not increasing their precept and keeping up with rising costs for services and improving things. So I personally don't want us to fall into that same challenge. We've got paper in front of us about what that compound impact could be over multiple years. I fully agree with you that people out there are struggling. We're asking for 50p or 57p possibly extra per week on a band D property. Lots of those on the most poor incomes in our community will also be receiving additional support with their council tax bills, and may live in bands A to C properties as well, and it won't be as high for them. The impact what our new budget states. There are lots of things we've been able to deliver this year that we wouldn't have been able to have delivered had we not made the budgetary decisions that we did this time a year ago. And I appreciate that there was some frustration within the community about that, but I'm also absolutely certain that it was the right thing to have done at the time. And I stand behind that. I think we set ourselves up for success, and we wouldn't have been able to have done lots of the things we have done this year had we not made that difficult decision 12 months ago. The third thing, with respect to Councillor Garside, is if there are things in the budget that we've gone through in detail this evening that you don't want in there to bring that number down, please do suggest them, because I've not heard around this table any suggestions of things that people don't want us to deliver. And I think it's a really sound budget with things that we want to see for our town. And I think we're asking people to contribute more. I accept that. But we were strong in our commitment that last year was a one-off, and we are sticking to that commitment.
Councillor Tews.
I think Tom's made my point that I completely remember, or I'm not going to go there. Let's say this: we would be wrong to not put up the precept at all, because we will fall behind, and then we will end up asking people to swallow a much bigger pill further down the line. I guess it feels like if we suggest getting rid of the youth bus, and then that's just going to cost 7p. So Tom, you've asked us to look through line by line. We've looked through line by line, and then the response is, don't get rid of that because it's only going to make 7p. So it feels to me that all the discussion tonight has been largely, I don't know, we can still vote on it, but if it's only going to say P7p, then, you know, we might as well have it in, I guess. It's just, you know, this is our time, and we're trying to look at detail, I suppose.
Mr. Furman.
I'm happy to change the proposal that it is to have the 2 options in there as well.
Sorry, in respect of having to budget one with
one with the bus and one without.
Okay. So you would like to propose that?
Yes, propose then recommending, you know, an option of one of those 2 budgets to the full council.
We have a seconder. Happy for vote to go on.
Yeah, that's right.
Just show of hands then on that.
Is there any abstentions?
Just to clarify, we're not voting for the budget now. We're just voting to send it to full council. Was that abstention or
Yes, abstention.
abstention? That's carried. And that brings the meeting to an end at 7:30 dead on.
Thank you.